Like, I haven't watched much of the lab review.
Lab review?
Yeah, like on
Pre-recorded.
yeah, the video about like what we did for the lab. Like I was watching the one for diversity. It's like 9 minutes long only. But like, goddamn, so boring.
I haven't watched it. I watched the animal remake.
Bambi, your mic's on.
Oh shit.
Is it just me or wait, shit.
Hello. Took me a while
Hello.
to get in today. Sorry for the delay. My computer is really slow and the program crashed. Anyway, I'm here now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for all of you to arrive here this morning for our makeup class, 9 in the morning on a Monday, especially while you have exams this week. What exam do you have this week, or exams?
Biolab, Friday in the morning.
Oh yes, Biolab. That's gonna be an awful one. Good luck to you guys. I know that that's a hard class. I've heard from students.
Oh, it's not just us.
No, it's not just you. It's every year, every cohort. Yeah. I think particularly the lab. So, yeah. If you do well, then you are way above the curve. All right. Anyway, good luck for that. Stay strong. Don't give up hope.
Already did.
Today, all right, let me try to get it. Today is on the topic of factorial designs. There's a worksheet to go along with this one, and I've posted the worksheet in Blackboard in the folder called worksheets. That worksheet is not for credit. You don't get any credit for submitting any answers. You just do that on your own, and it should help you understand this lesson and prepare you for the exam. Because this lesson is a little bit tough, challenging, I would say. That said, let's get through it. Does anyone want to collect data today?
Yeah, I think our group, you approved of it, and we also sent you the Google form that we made.
Uh-huh. So you're ready?
Yeah.
That's cool. Great. Anyone else? All right. I think there will be just one group collecting data today. Everyone else, keep working on your materials. Try to get them done. If you can collect data tomorrow, it's cool. Otherwise, there's next Tuesday, and I think we'll extend data collection into future, not just next week, but the week after as well. All right, I'd like to do a 1-minute meditation like I always do. So I'm starting a timer now. Get relaxed and quiet for 1 minute, starting now. Start recording. Before I begin today, do you have any questions or concerns about this class or about the program, the JIP program? Or any worries that you'd like to share?
When is our break again?
Did you ask when is the break?
Yeah, I remember there was a break for Songkran. What one is it?
Oh, the Songkran break. I don't know. But I've marked all the holidays in our syllabus calendar. Could anyone else speak to that? I think that Songkran is early April, but I don't know. Anyway, it's in the syllabus. Anything else? Well, if you have any concerns, feel free to raise them either here in class or privately. Interaction. All right, so first of all, I'd like to start by defining this most difficult concept of today's lecture, the interaction effect. This is what happens when one variable, like let's say you're studying two variables at the same time, and I'm not talking about the dependent variable, I'm talking about independent variables or predictor variables. So if they influence one another, that means the degree or level or quality or category of one of the variables affects how the other variable behaves. If that happens, that's an interaction effect. So in research, when one variable influences the effect of another independent variable or predictor variable, and it influences outcomes, then we say there's a interaction effect. And here's an example. Schnall and colleagues in 2008 tested whether disgusting physical environments affected moral disgust. And they measured moral disgust, they measured the impact of moral disgust by asking for participants' ratings of how harshly they judge a behavior in a hypothetical situation. So they would judge more harshly that behavior in the hypothetical story if they were sitting in a disgusting environment. And they would judge less harshly if their environment were clean and tidy and neat looking. But the researchers also measured personal body consciousness, also called private body consciousness. Anyway, they expected it to interact with the physical environment variable, and they were right. That what they found was that only those high in private body consciousness or personal body consciousness were affected by their physical environment. So those that were high in personal body consciousness were more upset or more affected by a dirty environment. It seems like the dirty environment caused them to become anxious or disturbed internally in their body, and they picked up on that body consciousness. They were more aware of that, and yet they allowed that feeling to influence their judgments, probably because they didn't know that their feelings of anxiety or disgust, that emotion inside that they felt, they didn't realize that that was going to influence their ratings of judgment against behaviors that they felt were despicable or immoral. In other words, the participants did not realize that moral disgust can be elevated under a condition of physical disgust. If the participants had known that, they would have adjusted their own ratings of moral disgust, considering that they realize that they're also feeling physical disgust. They would counteract that and not allow their emotions to affect their judgments. But because they didn't know that, they allowed their emotion to influence their ratings. All right, so I've given you now a full picture of that study, and you can see how the one variable, personal body consciousness, influenced the other variable, the disgustingness of the environment, so that the one influenced the other to influence how it affects a third variable, the dependent variable, which is ratings of harshness on this on the hypothetical scenario. All right. Sorry for the long description and explanation. Next slide. All right. Or do you have any questions about that?
So in this case, the experimenters are planning to look at the interaction between the two variables. So the other isn't a confounding variable, right?
That's right. The reason it's not confounding is that the two variables were manipulated carefully, and they were documented.
Okay.
If they had not documented or not carefully manipulated and not kept track of what levels were assigned to which participants, then the two variables would become confounded because one would influence the other, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the one or the other. But by careful design and careful manipulation, you can separate and isolate their two effects separately as well as on one another, as we will see. Great question. Any other questions? All right. So that was a study with two independent variables. There was private body consciousness, or personal, and the other one was a quasi-independent variable. It was whether or not a participant happens to have high or low personal body consciousness. The manipulated one was whether they were in an environment that was disgusting or not. That was experimental variable. The other one was a quasi-independent variable, which is whether or not people were high or low in their personal body consciousness, which is a trait or personal factor that they came into the experiment with. They were not assigned. They assigned themselves from birth, you could say, or from their environmental training. So it was not experimentally assigned, which makes it a quasi-experimental variable and makes the entire experiment a quasi-experimental design or quasi-experiment. So anytime one of the variables is not assigned experimentally, it's not a true experiment. It becomes, at best, a quasi-experiment. Or a correlation study or something else. All right, factorial designs. Each level of one independent variable, for example, disgusting room, is combined with each level of another independent variable, in this case, personal body consciousness, to produce all possible combinations of levels. So when you cross those two independent variables, they create multiple possible conditions. These combinations are called conditions. Each condition is the combination of the levels of each independent variable. One level of one independent variable and one level of another independent variable combine to make a condition. For example, you can have high or low body consciousness. Let's say we're dealing with low body consciousness. Yeah, that's one level. And let's say we're dealing with a messy environment and a clean environment. Let's just take the messy environment. So now we take low private body consciousness or personal and mix it with the messy environment. So those two levels of the two independent variables combine into one condition. So the condition is low personal body consciousness in a messy environment. You can see that by crossing the two levels with the two levels, you have four possible conditions. And that's, you can know that by 2 times 2. When you multiply the number of levels of one variable with the number of levels of another variable, 2 by 2, you get four possible conditions. In the above example, personal body consciousness cannot be assigned because it is innate. It is a non-manipulated independent variable, which makes it a quasi-experimental variable. Therefore, the whole design is a quasi-experimental design. Any questions from this slide?
Can there be a case where both the independent variables are ones that can be manipulated?
If they can both be manipulated, then that is a true experiment, or a proper, or you just call it an experimental design.
Oh, so in this case, one of them has to be non-manipulated.
If one of them is non-manipulated, the whole thing is called a quasi-experimental design. So just one quasi-variable changes the whole label of the whole study to be quasi.
Okay.
Any other questions? That was a good question. Thank you. This is this lecture is all basically vocabulary and straightforward logic. Some of the logic is a little bit hard to follow, but so far so good. Next slide, the 2 by 2 factorial designs. This is when you have two independent variables and each of them has two levels. So the two independent variables could be cell phone use, whether you use a cell phone while you're driving, and the time of day, whether it's daytime or nighttime. And the dependent variable is driving ability. Let's say how many traffic violations you have made in your lifetime as measured by, no. Let's say it's driving violations measured in a driving test. So each of these independent variables has two levels. And you can see the two levels are represented in the first two, and the second two levels of the second independent variable are represented in the second two. So when I say 2 by 2, I mean one IV multiplied by another IV. If one IV has two levels, it's a 2. If the other IV has two levels, it's also a 2. So when you multiply the 2 with the 2, you get 4, meaning 4 conditions, which is 4 possible combinations from the two levels of one IV and the two levels of another IV. Any questions? All right, then we can get more complicated when we add a third independent variable. So we can see in this Rubik's Cube that we can add levels to our square grid design by making that grid three-dimensional instead of two-dimensional? And someone asked the question. All right. So as you can see from the Rubik's Cube, three-dimensional space can be used or illustrated in a drawing to conceptualize not two independent variables, but three independent variables. When we get into trouble is when we have to illustrate four independent variables, which we can do with multiple Rubik's Cubes, all juxtaposed with each other. And then beyond that, you just don't really illustrate them anymore. All right, so let's add another IV. Type of phone. You can have handheld or hands-free phones. And you can have not using a cell phone, which is 3 levels. So we've got handheld, hands-free, no phone. Now we have a 2 by 2 by 3 factorial design. There are 3 variables, 3 independent variables, or 3 IVs. They are, well, let's go back to the previous slide. Cell phone, time of day, type of phone. So those 3 IVs are represented with the 2, and the 3. So each of those numbers in that multiplication is an independent variable, and each number represents the number of levels of that independent variable. So how many cells would you expect? Now, when I say cell, I mean boxes in the grid. Notice the grid in this previous slide. Each box in the grid is a cell, which is a condition. So how many cells would we have in this condition? Someone answered 12. That is correct. How many levels would we have in this condition? I'm sorry, in this experiment? Anyone? 12 again, someone guessed, but well, I think we could just add them. Yeah, so 2, 2, and 3, if you add them up together, there's just 7. So you could count the levels as 7 levels. How many independent variables are there in this experiment? 3 is correct. Someone answered. Thank you. So I'm getting you used to thinking about the vocabulary. So you have to understand what we're referring to when we talk about cells, conditions, levels, and independent variables. Good. Next, we have between subjects, within subjects, and mixed subjects designs. And I called them factorial designs here instead of subjects. Subjects is maybe somewhat becoming outdated as a vocabulary term. Now we talk about within participants, between participants. And in the case of mixed, we usually just call it mixed factorial or mixed, well, we can say mixed subjects, mixed participants designs. So what are all these? Within means repeated measures. That means that every single participant is tested under all conditions. If there are 4 conditions, the same participant is measured 4 times. The measurement is the dependent variable. And to be measured 4 times, well, they would have to participate in all 4 conditions. What's the point of being measured if you don't participate in the conditions? All right. So in a within subjects design, every subject participates in all conditions. The next one is between subjects. Everyone completes one and only one condition. They are measured once only. And the last one, mixed effects designs. Those are where one of the independent variables is measured within subjects and one of them is measured between subjects. So if I have a within subject variable with 2 levels and a between subject variable with 2 levels, and let's say that, okay, so the within is measured twice, the between is measured once each. Now we cross them and we see that every participant is measured twice, but there's 4 possible conditions. So they're going to be measured either once in condition 1 and once in condition 2, or once here and once in the third one, or once in the first, once in the fourth, or all possible conditions. So maybe not all possible conditions, but there's going to be 2 measures and 4 conditions. 2 measure, I mean, each participant is going to participate in 2 conditions and be measured twice. But between all of the subjects, there's going to be 4 possible conditions that are being studied and measured within the study. So that's the mixed. And here's an exercise. Are these within subjects, between subjects, or mixed measures experiments? All right, first one, COVID vaccine. Experimental shot or control shot? Let's say you sign up to either get the real vaccine or get a placebo, and we want to see how effective the real vaccine is.
It should be in between subjects then.
That is between, that's correct. All right, next one, caffeine versus no caffeine on exam performance. And let's say that half of the participants are given caffeine before the midterm exam and half are not. And then we give a final exam, and the ones that were not given caffeine, they're given caffeine for the final. And the ones that were given caffeine for the midterm are not given caffeine for the final. So by the time they've taken both exams, they have participated twice.
Within? Because they went through 2 conditions. One was with caffeine and one was without caffeine.
Very good. I had to think about that one a little bit because I was at first treating the midterm and the final as another independent variable, but it's not. So there's only one independent variable, caffeine. And you're measuring it on your dependent variable, midterm or final exam, the exam itself. So you can give the exam twice. You give it at the midterm and the final. And yes, exactly right, what you said. It is a within subjects design. Last one, maybe the hardest one. Let's see. Oops. Driving simulation performance with and without loud music playing in the background. Half of the participants are tested while sleep deprived, and half after a full night of sleep. Now I said
Mixed
within
design.
with, sorry, go ahead.
Mixed design.
Mixed. I know that that is one correct answer. Yes. I would also accept yeah, it has to be mixed. That's correct. You are correct. The reason it has to be mixed is the first variable, loud music or no music, is within subjects. And the reason it's within subjects is because I used the word and, with and without loud music. So that was my little clue. And the second variable, being sleep deprived or not sleep deprived, is between, because I said half of the participants. All right. And I didn't switch them and test them again. I just tested them one time. Half of them sleep deprived, half of them not. So we could say that the sleep deprived ones were tested twice. They were tested with loud music and without. And the ones that were not sleep deprived were also tested with and without loud music. So everyone was tested twice, half in the sleep deprived group, half in the not sleep deprived group. So it is a within and a between. It is a mixed. Very good. Next slide. You can depict a like a factorial, sorry, I was thinking of the word factorial design. You can graph it like this. So your y-axis is always your dependent variable, and your x-axis can have two independent variables. They can be represented in the space along the x-axis, where one level goes here and one level goes there on the left and right. And you can also depict another independent variable using different bar colors or line colors. Or if you're doing a line graph, one line represents one level of your independent variable. Another line represents another level of your independent variable. And their endpoints, the start and end point of each line, represents the two levels of another independent variable. Or if you had three levels, you could have 3 points on the line, beginning, middle, end, for example. Or you could have 3 lines. You could have red, blue, and green or something. Or solid, dotted, and dashed. So you could do lots of different design techniques to differentiate between lines and between bars in order to graphically depict the different levels of your variables. Any questions? All right. Here's a question. How would you graph the third variable? Good question. Okay. Let me remember. I know that one way you can graph it is 3-dimensionally. Another way you can graph it is by setting up multiple graphs. Like if I had a line graph here that you see on this slide, and then another line graph for the other level of a third variable. Let's say the third variable has 2 levels. Then one graph represents one level of that third variable, and another graph represents another level of that third variable. Now, having 2 graphs and juxtaposing them, it's a little bit hard to see the interaction because you have to compare graphs, and it gets visually complicated. So it is harder for the reader to conceptually recognize and understand how those 2 graphs illustrate an interaction, for example, if there was an interaction. But the clever reader can do it. So we do see graphic depictions of three independent variables interacting with each other using multiple graphs, and asking the reader to visually inspect and compare between graphs to recognize and understand the impact of the third variable on the other 2 variables, for example. Yeah, it can be done. It gets complicated, but it can be done. Great question. Main effects and simple effects. A main effect is the effect of an independent variable. Now here I have variable A and variable B. Let's look at the first box, the first grid, variable A. Notice that the top 2 boxes are light blue, bottom 2 are dark blue. The light blue ones represent level 1 of the independent variable A. And the 2 dark blue ones are level 2 of the independent variable. Now, why are they divided in half? Because those 2 levels of IVA are themselves cut in half by the levels of independent variable B. But we can ignore that cutting in half. We can ignore variable B when we are talking about the main effect of level A. So if we're asking, is there a main effect of A? We simply compare level 1 to level 2. That means if we have a measurement in level A, the left box, sorry, level A1, left box, and another measurement in level A1, right box, we simply average them to get an average of level A1. We do the average for level A2 as well. So when we average these pairs of boxes, we can compare the average of level A1 to the average of level A2. Now, if there's a difference between A1 and A2, that is called a main effect. We could also compare level B1 to level B2, taking the average of the 2 boxes on B1, the average of the 2 boxes in B2, compare the averages together. If there's a difference, there's a main effect. All right. What do I mean? I'm sorry, I may not have explained something quite right first. In the first place, you have to understand that these grids, you see these grids, they are used to store values of measurements. So for example, the condition of cell phones, yes, and time of day, daytime, So that yes and day box has a value after you've measured the participants. Let's say you have 30 participants and they all participate in that condition and everyone has a measurement, and you take all of those measurements, you average them, you get some number. Let's say you have an average of 6 driving errors, and that's the average across all your participants. Then you put the number 6 in that box, in the yes day box. So that's a measurement of your condition in your experiment. All right, so then you have these measurements in all of your conditions, so you can average across conditions within levels. So the effect of A is the average of box 1A and another box 1A compared to the average of box A2, one box and the other box. Sorry, it's a little hard to describe in words, but it's really easy to see if you just look at the boxes. So I don't know if you can see my pointer. Can you see my pointer, the arrow?
Yes.
Okay, great. So when you average these two and you average these two, then you compare them. That's represented with this arrow, comparing. It's a comparison arrow. And then by comparing them, if there's a difference, it's a main effect. If there's no difference, it's no main effect. All right, next one is the simple effects. The simple effects compare two conditions. Notice that the main effects really compared 4 conditions. They compared 2 against another 2. But the simple effect compares only 2 conditions to each other. Notice the comparable conditions in the gray shaded boxes here. All right, so we compare conditions that are different from one another. The shaded conditions are the same in terms of level A, IVA level 1. The 2 shaded boxes are both level A1. The 2 white ones are both level A2. If we're looking at simple effects, we compare one of the A1 boxes to another of the A2 boxes. We don't compare A1 to A1. We compare A1 to A2. The simple effect of, so that's one simple effect. We could compare A1 and A2, but that would be the simple effect of variable B. So these comparisons on the left are simple effects of variable A. Notice that to find a simple effect of variable A, you compare the easiest way to say is just these 2 boxes. Or you compare these 2 boxes. So we have 2 simple effects of level A, and those 2 simple effects represent 2 conditions that differ on variable A. Here we have another 2 simple effects that differ on level B, variable B, sorry. 2 simple effects which compare 2 conditions or a pair of conditions that differ in level B. They differ in level B1 to B2 and another B1 to B2. And here we have non-comparable conditions, you can say. You don't compare Actually, this is really a confusing diagram, so you can ignore this. I'm glad that I changed the font to gray. It's just kind of confusing. All right, so skip, let me not even talk about that, and let's go up to this. When two neighboring simple effects differ, this is evidence of an interaction effect. So we can detect interaction effects by comparing simple effects. This is illustrated here. Notice that I have two arrows comparing, so two arrows per grid here in the gray and white boxes. We have one arrow on the left, one arrow on the right. Now let's say the left arrow compares 6 in the top box to 5 in the bottom box, a difference of 1. Let's say that the right box, the right gray box, has 7, and the bottom box also has 5. So the two bottom boxes are 5 and 5. Two top boxes are 6 and 7. Now, if we compare 6 and 5, that's a difference of 1. If we compare 7 and 5, that's a difference of 2. So if we look at the subtraction, we've got a difference of 1 and a difference of 2, and that is different. That means we found a difference between differences. I know that's confusing, but that's why this concept is confusing, because we have to use these weird verbal descriptions. Difference between differences, or in other words, a difference between simple effects, constitutes an interaction. Any questions? If you understand this, you understand one of the most difficult things in this class, I think. You might partially understand it and partially not understand it, and this will become more clear as you look at more real world examples. But here is the basic definition of an interaction effect. It is the difference between differences of condition comparisons. And a better way to say it is it's a difference between simple effects. But notice that I don't compare the simple effect of the first two boxes on the left to the simple effect of the right and left box on the right grid. That would be an unfair comparison. That would be comparing apples to oranges, because you're comparing the simple effect of variable A to a simple effect of variable B. Those two simple effects are not comparable. They're not fair to compare. And that's not one of the possible simple effects that you would use to detect an interaction effect. You'd only use comparable simple effects to detect an interaction effect. Well, it's almost 10 o'clock. How about an 8-minute break? Let's meet again at 10:05. Okay?
Okay.
10:05, we'll start class again. Hello, I'm back. Welcome back. Now we are moving on to, can you see this? The slides?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay, let me share. Thanks. Great. All right. So an interaction effect is when the effect of one variable depends on the presence or level of another variable. In other words, one IV influences another IV. On the top graph, the two lines are parallel. Anytime you see parallel lines, there's no interaction. You can imagine this scenario is whether the driver is a teenager or not, and whether it's daytime or nighttime. And that's measuring driving errors in a driving test. All right, so if the lines are parallel, there's no interaction. If the lines are not parallel, there is an interaction. So it's really easy to see whether there's an interaction or not. Next, spreading interaction. This is where it looks like there's a greater interaction at one level than at another level. So yes, there's an interaction. You could think of this in terms of those who have to wear glasses to drive. What happens if they don't wear glasses? I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me see. Yes means they need glasses and they're not wearing them. No means they need glasses, but they're wearing them. So yes is without and no is with glasses. Notice that in this example, panel B, at nighttime, there's a bigger I'm sorry. For those who need glasses but are not wearing them, there's a bigger difference between day and night. So you can see the yes the yes level on the left, there's a difference between day and night. But on the right side, where it says no, there's no difference between day and night. So what we're seeing is the day-night difference matters more if you need glasses but you're not wearing them. It doesn't matter day or night if you need glasses and you're wearing them. So that is an example of an interaction effect where the day-night variable depends on whether you are using the lenses that you need to drive. That's one variable influencing the other variable. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we can see that the interaction effect by virtue of non-parallel lines. Next one, yeah.
Mr. Jason,
Mhm.
seeing that there's so much stuff like variables and interactions that could affect an experiment, is there any possibility to like keep it as controlled, especially for us because we're psychologists, right? And even
Yeah.
the simplest things could set certain people off. What is the best way to keep all the variables from happening?
You said, what's the best way of keeping the variables from what?
What's the best way to stop these interactions from happening, or at least detect them after they happened?
To prevent an interaction, you should select variables that you know don't interact. But there's good news. We can call this good news. Interactions are desirable. We want interactions. And here's the reason why. They are interesting. Although they are very complicated to describe in this class, they are perhaps more interesting than the main effects. When we see evidence that one variable influences another variable, we are seeing something new. Often it is new and it is less well known about, so it is more discovered. And something that's more discovered is more interesting to psychological journal article readers. So we want interactions. Last one, crossover interaction. This is just when the lines cross. So there's nothing special about it. A crossover interaction is just an interaction. So whether you call it a spreading or a crossover, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that there's an interaction or there's not. You don't have to learn the names of the different kinds of interactions because that's not so important. All right, so we can see in this crossover interaction that there's presence of rain and absence of rain. So on the left of panel C, the yes level, there's rain, it's raining. On the right, it's not raining, it's dry. All right, so in the daytime, there's more driving errors when it's raining and fewer when it's dry. But in the nighttime, there are fewer driving errors when it's raining and more driving errors when it's not raining. So the simple effect of rain differs between day and nighttime. In daytime, the simple effect is rain makes more driving errors. At nighttime, the simple effect is that rain makes fewer driving errors. As you can see, the effect of rain depends on whether you're measuring at daytime or nighttime. Clearly, the time of day influences the effect of rain. Or you could say the effect of rain influences the effect of day versus night, time of day on the driving errors. So these two variables clearly interact with each other, and they interact so clearly that there is a kind of reversing of the direction of one of the independent variables' effects at one of its levels compared to another of its levels, which means simple effect 1, simple effect 2 are reversed, opposite. So when there's an opposite effect of one of the simple effects, then that's a, positive, negative, then that's a crossover interaction effect. But obviously it's an interaction effect because one variable influences the other. And that's the main point of interaction. All right, so there's main and simple effects with presence of interaction. We can have that. That's basically combining. So each IV's main effect depends on the level of the other IV. An example is caffeine and no caffeine on introvert and extrovert driving errors. So So we can turn to simple effects to gain as much understanding of the interaction as possible. We compare simple effects to one another in pairs. Example, compare the simple effect of caffeine on introverts to the simple effect of caffeine on extroverts. All right, so the introverts on the left, caffeine, no caffeine is a red and blue line. So if we see that the introverts, caffeine increases their driving errors compared to no caffeine. On the right, extroverts, we have caffeine reducing the effect of driving errors compared to no caffeine. Now, this is a crossover interaction, yes, but in this case, there's also a main effect. Do you know what the main effect is? Technically, there's two main effects. This is a little complicated. There's a main effect of extroversion. What that means is extroverts make more driving errors. So if extroverts make more driving errors, that's a main effect of extroversion / introversion. To realize this, you can simply eyeball the graph and see that the average of these two endpoints of the red and blue line at the extrovert level, the average of the red and blue line is right in between those two endpoints. And the average of the endpoints at the introvert side is right here between the two endpoints, between the red and blue. And if you compare the between point on the left with the between point on the right, the between point on the right is higher. There's more driving errors for extroverts. So that is a main effect for this variable on the bottom, because on the x-axis, this introvert-extrovert variable has a main effect, which you can see with higher scores on the right than on the left. That's a main effect. Main effects are found by averaging simple effects and comparing simple effects to each other. So here's a simple effect on the left. Here's a simple effect on the right. If you average them and compare, if there's a difference, then you have a main effect. All right, there's easier ways to detect main effect, but that's one way. Over here on the right, I will read this. It says, the interpretation of main effects is questionable in the presence of an interaction, because the main effect depends on the nature of that interaction. Should we even mention main effects then? Yes, we should usually mention them, because readers may still be interested in the main effect, even if that main effect depends on all the levels of the other variable. So yeah, you should still mention, even though the interaction effect qualifies the main effect, which means the main effect cannot be understood by itself completely until you interpret that main effect in the context of its interaction with the other variable. All right, This is the final slide of this lecture. It asks you to create a factorial design table. All right, so this is one exercise. Make a factorial design table. If you have pen and pencil handy, or if you want to draw on your computer, whatever you want to do, create a factorial design table, which is a grid. I want you to make a grid. So make it 2 by 3 for an experiment on the effects of room temperature and noise level on performance on the SAT. So imagine you've got your participants taking the SAT, and you've got, well, make up the different levels and indicate if this is a between subjects, within subjects, or mixed, and explain why. Take a few minutes to do this, and then I'll ask you for your answers. So work independently. Do this on your own. I'll give you 2 minutes, and then I want to, let's say 3 minutes, and I'll ask you to tell about your answers. So I hope you've labeled your your levels in your grid. You could do it as simple as A1, A2, B1, B2, B3, or if you want to be more concrete, you could say noise and silence, or you could have 2 levels of noise, like silence, quiet noise, and loud noise, depending if that's 2 levels or 3 levels. And the other variable could be room temperature, which could be hot and cold, or it could be like 20 degrees, 25 degrees, 30 degrees, whatever you like. And then you have values in each square in your grid that correspond to your measurement, your average per condition. So each square might have the average value of, say, 5 or 10 or 20 participants, depending on how many participants you sampled. Yeah. Now let's indicate whether this is a between subjects or within subjects and explain why. Would anyone like to share?
I guess this would be a between subject design since the SAT couldn't be retested in this case.
Very good.
Or we wouldn't want to retest the SAT.
Perhaps we would not, because the SAT, it's long. It takes a long time. So that's a good reason to test only one time. And if we're testing only one time, you got it. It is between subjects. Very good. Good answer. What were your levels of the noise variable? Anyone?
For me, I just had like silent, quiet, and loud.
Good. And how about for the room temperature variable?
For me, I had hot and cold.
Okay, just like I suggested. Anyone else? Did anyone else have something different?
I did like I did noise level has silent, and now for about room temperature I have 20 degrees Celsius, 25 and 30.
Oh, exactly what I said, huh?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
this.
It's like I'm psychic. Oh, all right. Complete a worksheet on Blackboard on simple main and interaction effects as training. Answers are provided for your assistance. Actually, not all the answers are provided. Some of them are. The ones that are not provided, you can send me your answers and I will tell you whether they are right or wrong. If you want, it's optional. And because you're not turning in this worksheet, I won't know if you did it or not. So it's really up to you. It's your prerogative, your responsibility, and your decision if you want to do the worksheet. It is for your benefit. I think that this is a tough subject, so it deserves some practice and some what do you call it? Reteaching or reconfirmation of all of this stuff. Prepare and submit your materials for my approval. I'm talking about your data collection. Don't collect data until I've approved your materials. And the last point, reading assignment is canceled again this week to aid you in preparation for data collection. I suppose it's also to aid you in having sufficient time and energy and mental effort and willpower to do well on your other classes and exams so that you don't have to spread your effort into this class this week.
By the
Yeah.
way, for us, if you already approved and we're collecting our data today, do you want us to just send it here or send it on our line group? Because I feel like some people aren't here today for the class. So if we send it on the line group and ask them to complete it when they have time today, we might get more participants.
Wonderful idea and excellent justification. I think that's an excellent idea. So thank you. Please do that. And if you're and please complete it, everyone. We need as many participants as possible. So be a good participant and complete one another's studies so that every group has as many participants as possible. You don't get any credit for participating. It's all voluntary. If you do feel uncomfortable participating because of the particular questions or because you don't have time or something, you are free to not participate. it's voluntary, but I do want everyone, I mean, I ask and I kind of expect everyone to participate in everyone else's research studies. Do good for others because you expect them to do good for you. All right. That's the end of this lecture. Well, do you have any questions about this lecture or any other questions about data collection or anything? Or group assignments? Your paper?
After we get the data, do we write up another report and send it to you?
Yes.
Okay.
After you get your data, yeah, we will talk about analyzing data. We haven't really talked about that. I'm saving that discussion for once you have already collected data. So you have data to work with, and then I will tell you about what to do with it. Oh, someone asked, they did not get any feedback on the first draft. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I have not read many drafts. I've only read 2 of them so far. And I think there's like 16 groups or something. So I really need to get going on that. I will work on that this week. Thank you for reminding me. All right. Any others? Okay. Okay, so the one group that's collecting data, good luck. Good job for being prepared already.
Thank you. We already submitted our form link on the general psychology group because everyone's there.
Perfect. In case there's anyone not there and you're in this class, please figure out and find out how to be add yourself somehow to the line group, because that is the best, and perhaps that's the only way that some groups know how to contact everyone in the class. So that's a really good communication between students in the class. If we can just update that with any new students that joined. There's only like in fact, I'm not even sure that new students have joined. I'm still trying to figure that out. But if there's any new students, does anyone know? There were supposed to be some new students joining this class. Are there new students in this class compared to general psychology?
I don't think so.
Huh.
We didn't get any news about it. So
Huh. Yeah. I was supposed to receive 5 students from the Thai program that would be joining this class, the international program. This was a trial program or a new idea that our faculty was going to do. Thought it was going to happen already, but it seems to have not happened because I have not yet identified any new students, I think. Anyway, all right, that's all. That's the end of class. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Have a good week. Bye.